everyone, and welcome to the Passionate Professional Series, episode 15. My name is Tunde Kukoyi, and it's a pleasure to be your host once again. The Passionate Professional Series is an offshoot of the Passion and Purpose of, which is a channel on YouTube that shares useful knowledge that helps you to maximize your passions and your purpose, so you don't enjoy just success, but also fulfillment in your personal and professional lives. Can you believe it? We're already on episode 15 already. Over the course of this series, we've had important and interesting discussions with several people from all walks of life, passionate professionals from business, from art, from sports, from healthcare, Olympic medalists, you name it. We've had several guests, and I've been learning so much from them, and I hope that you've been learning so much from them as well. It is hoped that by bringing these passionate professionals closer to us, we are able to actually they're able to spark the flame within us that helps us to reach for our inner potential. Our guest for today is already in the studio, and I want to say a massive thank you to those of you who've been watching, who've been joining us live, and as well as those of you that have been watching the replay, because it's because of you that this entire journey has been worthwhile. Now, before I bring up our guest for today, who's already in the studio, she's very special and unique, and I'm sure you learn a lot from her. As is the tradition on this series or this show, I always like to start with an appetizer question. And my appetizer question for today is this: how would you know when you are successful? That might sound strange. In other words, when would you know what are the metrics by which you would know, yes, I'm now successful? Because when you ask most people, they tell you they want to be successful, but when you ask them, what does that really mean? You find out that they've not really taken time to think about it. So is it having a lot of money saved up in the bank for retirement, or is it reaching the peak of your career, or is it having a lot of freedom to be able to travel and visit as many countries in the world? Or perhaps it's for you, it just means having a closely knit and well-groomed family, or having the opportunity to educate all your children and get them well established. Or for someone else, it might just mean having that opportunity to take care of people that can't take care of themselves. It's important for you to define what success means to you, because if you do not know where you're going, how would you know when you get there? One of the wealthiest people in the world actually instantly defines success for him. I'm talking about Warren Buffett. He defines success for him as when those who are closest to him are happy and when they love him in return. And so, if you haven't done so already, I would encourage you to take some time to sit back and actually define what success means for you, not what the world defines success as, but what it means for you, because you don't want to get to the peak of the mountain and then realize that, oh, you've been climbing the wrong mountain all along. So, enough of my appetizer question, something for you to think about and to ponder about. Now I want to introduce our guest to us. So I'm going to start by reading a bio, and then I'll bring her up on stage. Okay, so our guest for today is Christine Whelan. So Dr. Whelan is an author, professor, and speaker. She's a clinical professor in the School of Human Ecology at the University of Wisconsin, Madison, and she's the director of MORE, which means Money, Relationships, and Equality. She graduated magna cum laude from Princeton University, where she was the editor in chief of the Daily Princetonian, and she was awarded the Daniel Sachs Scholarship to attend Worcester College at the University of Oxford. She earned a master's degree and a doctorate from the University of Oxford, and has held teaching positions at the University of Pittsburgh, University of Iowa, and the Princeton University. She's a nationally recognized thought leader, helping several organizations on purpose-focused approaches to health, finances, and self-improvement strategies. She has been published in the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, the New York Times, and she's appeared live on television programs and radio programs across the United States. She's the best-selling author of the acclaimed 10-lecture series, Finding Your Purpose, an Audible Originals Great Course program. She's the author of 5 books, including The Big Picture, Generation WTF, I think that means Why Tenacious and Fearless, and Marry Smart, and Why Smart Men Marry Smart Women. She and her family live and work in Madison, Wisconsin. Um, so, ladies and gentlemen, join me as I welcome to the stage Dr. Christine Whelan.
Hi
Hi,
there. Thank
Christine.
you.
How are you doing today?
Introduction.
How are you doing today? Finally, it's a pleasure to finally have you on the Passionate Professional series. I think this has been long coming. The last time last year when we were about to have this show that I think COVID going the way. But yeah, thankfully you are here today.
Uh, yes, absolutely. Last year was a blur of that sort of thing, but we carried on, and now hopefully we're through the worst of it.
And how are you doing today? How is Wisconsin today? It looks like the sun is reflecting somewhere behind your camera.
It is. It's beautiful. We have had lots of snow days and inclement weather, but hopefully spring is on the way.
Cool, cool. So thank you once again. I think we'll just get started because I know we have a lot to talk about on the subject of passion, purpose, meaning, finding meaning in life. You've done TED Talks on this, so this is something you've been doing for over 20 years. You have been teaching this, and I know this is something that you're really passionate about. Cool. So I've read your bio, but before we jump in, I think I'd like you to tell us a bit more about yourself. Tell us some fun facts about yourself, some interesting things about yourself that I probably have not mentioned from the bio.
Well, I have been interested in advice and why people ask for advice, pay for advice, whether people take advice, and whether it works in their lives. I've been interested in that since I was a teenager. And I actually built my whole research and teaching career around the idea of asking and answering questions of what matters most to you and why does it matter? And then how do you make it happen in your life? And so, one of the fun facts about me is that so at Oxford, most people studied, very serious things in the Bodleian Library. Well, I did my doctoral dissertation on self-help books, and
Mhm.
I read all of these crazy self-help books full of advice. And people said, "Why are you taking your time to study these silly, frivolous books?" But it turns out that these are some of the most influential books in people's lives. These are the buzzwords and the catchphrases that uh, that sort of tell us how we should be living. And so I'm really interested in that, and then asking the question behind it all, which is why, what what really matters to me, and how can I be purposeful in my life.
Wow, interesting. So um, I think you reap double benefits in the sense that you were working on your dissertation and at the same time you were reading self-help books. How cool is that?
Yes, oh, I like that. Uh-huh. But
Cool.
if you come into my office, you will think that I have every problem on the planet because I have self-help books for just about anything you could possibly imagine.
And I find that interesting because I've met a couple of people that say that they don't believe in self-help books, that they think that they're just a waste of time. But it seems like there's books for almost everything, like anxiety, fear of public speaking. What's your take on self-help books? Do they really help?
So the flippant answer is that each and every one of these books would change your life if you followed its advice. Because of course these are books of behavior change, and so if you follow the advice and change your behavior, it will change your life. The thing is, though, that's not how we read self-help books. We tend to look at them and get maybe to chapter 3, and then we put them aside and say, oh, I'll finish it later. But we never do, and we never make the changes that the books advise. And then what we end up doing is just going and buying another one. So what self-help books really do is they're very inexpensive ways that we can get a boost of self efficacy, a boost that says, gosh, maybe I will make the change this time. Maybe I will become the kind of person that I want to become. So, really, self help books are selling hope more than anything
Mm,
else.
true, true. And I read somewhere in your profile that I think um, you were born for this in terms of like speaking in front of the screen, writing books. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah. So, my mother Absolutely. So my mother wrote 27 books. She was, her name is
Wow.
Dr. Elizabeth Whelan, and she was the founder of the American Council on Science and Health, which was a public health organization. And she was on every TV show, and she was on the news all the time. She had her own nationally syndicated radio show. And so when I was 8, she brought me into the studio and said I should have my own radio show as well. So I started really, really early with this idea of translating academic research into something that real people can use in their everyday life. But while she did public health and science and everything from anti-smoking to weight loss and diets and things like that, I am really more interested in the inner self and all the advice around happiness, purpose, well-being, and trying to separate what works and what doesn't, the fact and the fiction.
Oh, that's interesting because definitely there are some things that work and some things that don't work, which we'll get to in a bit. I think since you've started talking about that, I think the next question, my follow-up question, will just be then, what are the things that you're passionate about? If you can tell us some of the things you're passionate about.
So I think the thing that I am most passionate about is taking things out of the lab and out of the ivory tower and the academy and applying them in everyday life. And so on the one hand, when people look at some of the things I do, they say, oh, well, those are just silly self-help exercises. But the thing is, when you talk about big concepts like purpose or happiness, if you just talk about it, people don't know how to put it into their lives. So the really, I think, very important work is to translate the research and figure out what that means when real people do it, not in a lab, but in the messy everydayness of our reality. And so I'm passionate about making things look so simple, but they really have a lot of research and underpinning behind them. And I think that is a real gift that I can give because I really like translating. I was trained to be a journalist. And so all
Mhm.
throughout high school and college and graduate school, I worked at newspapers. And so I really like asking questions of experts and then figuring out how to explain it. So that's probably the thing that I'm most passionate about in my professional life.
I guess it's not a surprise then that you graduated with a distinction because I think one of the most difficult things, and I think the whole essence of going to school, or well, that's not the essence of going to school, but what they make us believe is the essence of going to school is being able to translate a lot of all the things we read and just interpret it and bring out the meaning from it. Like if you read, for example, in my own field, because I work in healthcare, you have several studies and the the people that do best or that are most recognized are the people that are able to take all that knowledge, take all that academic research and make it sound simple. So I think that's a gift in itself. And saying that that's a gift, I agree that's a gift because having listened to your lecture series, I think it's actually a gift. Like being able to take all the research and take all the highfalutin things, put them away, and make them simple and applicable to everyday life. That's really a gift that you've got. Well done with that.
Well, thank you. And it's really what I enjoy. And one of the things that I always tell my students when they say, how did you
Mhm.
start doing this? Well, I said, this is a true story that after graduate school, I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do, like what job I should get or what I wanted my next step to be. And so I thought to myself, well, if I had to do a job description of what I wanted to do, forget a particular job, but what are the components of it? And I decided one of the things that was most important to me is that whatever I did, it be good cocktail party conversation. And by that, I mean that I could just tell anybody about it, and anybody would say, oh, I know something about this too, and I can share my story. And so that's how I knew that this was the work I wanted to get into, because everybody can share their story with me.
Sure. And what's your typical classroom or your lecture room? What's it like, especially when people come for the first time? What's the look on their faces? What are they expecting, and how do they leave the class? Just out of curiosity.
So I am known as the happy professor. And what I
Hmm.
do before lecture is I blast pop music. And so, first of all, you open the door to my lecture room, and there is just music going full blast. And the idea is to get everybody's energy up and to be energized and optimistic as you head into the lecture. And then I tell my students the same thing that I just told you about the cocktail party conversation. I say, I want you to have one or two nuggets out of this lecture that you want to turn and tell one of your friends or call your parents and say, hey, I learned this little bit of knowledge that I think you might enjoy as well. So I try to distill my lectures into not just things that they need to know for a test, but ideas that I want my students to internalize to make better choices about their well-being when they go shopping, when they make a choice about who to partner with, when they figure out what job to take. And so I really embrace the motto from Seneca, not for school, but for life we learn. So I have more than 120 students in my class every semester, and I think I could have 1,000, but certainly currently there aren't enough teaching assistants in a room big enough. So we're capped at only 120.
Interesting. Well, yeah, I feel like if I was in a learning environment and then there was a course like Happiness 101 or Proposal, I would definitely be a student because yeah, I think just like you said, from using Seneca's quotes, we're not just learning for school, but we're actually learning for life. So things that we can actually extrapolate from the classroom to our everyday lives. I wish they could teach you how to make pasta in school or things like that because it's when you or how to take care of a baby, things you never really learn in school, but those are the things that really probably matter the most when you start living life outside school. So that's really cool. Thank you for that. I'm going to ask now. So now moving on into your core area of expertise, but it's a question we commonly ask on this series. What then are your values, Christine?
How,
What are the
so I
things
love
that
this
you?
question because, yeah, I love this because this is one of the questions that I ask of people all the time. And I'm gonna tell you what I tell other people, which is values. Asking somebody what their values are is a very difficult question because even though they underpin all the choices we make in our everyday lives, often when we think about them, we get caught up in what we think we should value versus what we actually value and our lived values. And so one of the excuse me, one of the things that I find useful is to think about it in terms of the values that I want to guide me today, not necessarily in my entire life, but today. Because I've noticed as I have done this that my values on a Sunday may be different than my values on a Monday. And it's not that, I value honesty on a Sunday and not on a Monday, but more in terms of which of my many values I want to prioritize as I figure out how to use my time. So, for example, on weekends, my family and spending time with them absolutely takes priority. And so my values of community and of family and of faith, those are the things that really guide me on the weekends. Then during the week, it's not that I don't value those things, but a different set of values comes to the forefront, and I'm able to value the translation, my translational work, and my teaching. I really strongly value perseverance. That's probably one of the ones that goes through Monday through Sunday, all days of the week, is perseverance and sticking with something. But I have found that the more that we can make our exploration of values something that we can really see as actionable in our day, the more they go from just being these hypothetical things out there that we maybe should do to taking ownership about how we live our lives moment by moment.
Well, I've never really thought of it that way. I used to think that your values are fixed and they have to reflect every day in every way in everything you do. But yeah, talking about that, I really agree with you that um, your values, not that your values change, but the ones that take priority might differ depending on the context or the time of the day or the situation that you find yourself. But how then did you come about your values? Did you go on a meditation course, or how then did you find out what your values were? Just out
Well,
of curiosity.
So we're socialized, right? We're all socialized in our family of origin, in our culture, in our community, and there are values that go along with that. But then when we come of age and we're adults, we need to ask ourselves a kind of almost a profession of our own faith, right? What do we believe? And we don't necessarily need to believe what our parents or our faith community believes. We don't necessarily need to believe in the values that we grew up with, but we do need to take the time to look at what those values are and then decide if we're going to own them ourselves or if we are going to take different values. So, for example, for me, growing up, success and sort of fame and uh, sort of outward signs of success were really very important in my family. Academic achievement, all of these things were really prioritized. And that was a value that I took throughout my life. But then when I began to have children, I realized that while my own personal success was important in terms of helping other people, uh, I didn't myself need the accolades or the fame, the money, the power. I didn't really need that for myself as much as I was potentially raised to have, to have it be important for me. And instead, what I was more interested in is helping other people ask these questions of what matters to them. And so what that meant was that I could kind of reframe some of my values. And I actually dropped down to only teaching part-time because I wanted to spend more time with my kids. And that's a different value set than what I was raised to do, probably. Not that either one is good or bad. It was just sort of a different choice. And being able to say, okay, these are both great values. There's nothing wrong with success. There's nothing wrong with focusing on family, but you can't probably have both of them at the exact same time. Now, can I have both of them throughout the course of my life? I very much believe that I can, but it's okay to have one particular value take center stage. And really being honest with yourself is, I think, the most important thing.
Hmm. Wow, interesting. Um, for those of you who've just joined, I'm speaking with Dr. Christine Whelan, and we're talking about the subjects of values, your passion, your purpose. She said she's very passionate about translating academic research into simple tools that we can use for our everyday life. And we're now talking about our values. She's talked about how our values change, not change, but our values take different priorities depending on the phase of our life, depending on the time of the week as well. For example, over the weekend, you have family, you have community, you have faith, and things like that. So remember, for those of you that are watching, it's a live stream. So the reason it's a live stream is so that you can ask questions as well. I don't want to be the only one firing questions at Christine because we might not get the opportunity to do this again. So remember to comment in the comment section or ask questions if you have any questions for her. So we're going to move on now. And the next thing, which is something you've probably talked about for over 20 years, is we've talked about values, but I know that you tie values up into purpose. And a lot of people, and I think in your lecture series, that was one of the things you started with, that probably the number one question on most people's minds, if they could ask a superpower, is why am I here? Why exactly am I here? What's my purpose here? So you've been researching this and you've taught this several times, but how then would you define purpose for someone who's a newbie and saying, what exactly is my purpose? This purpose thing just seems really mystical. Can you just break it down for me?
So, just like with the question of values, purpose is one of those really big words that scares people, right? I mean, these are these very big, daunting concepts. And the classic definition of purpose is your singular life aim, the one thing that you were put on this earth to do, or that you believe you need to get out of, to do in your life. Now, anytime I think about purpose as that one thing, I get very nervous because we're all so multifaceted. We all have different things that we want to do. We have different life phases. So rather than thinking about purpose as your singular life aim, I encourage people to think about a purpose mindset. And when I define a purpose mindset as using your gifts what you're good at, in keeping with your values, the guiding things that you care about most, to make a positive impact on the lives of others. So using your gifts in keeping with your values to make a positive impact on the lives of others. And my definition of purpose is pro-social. And so it involves the idea of doing good for others. You can debate whether that actually is necessary for purpose. You can have a purpose of personal success, or of amassing a certain, a large sum of money, I guess. But I would say that those are actually goals, and that your purpose is a larger why, is a larger calling, and because it's something larger than you, it involves giving of yourself and helping other people. The research also suggests very much that when you engage in pro-social behaviors, when you help other people, when you give of your skills for the benefit of others, you actually are happier. So if you think about your purpose mindset and you think about it as really a part of thriving, then being pro-social in your purpose mindset really matters.
Wow. So I think from your definition, there's three key elements there. Your gifts, your values in combination with your gifts, and then helping the lives of others. So do those three have to be there for it to be for you to be a purpose statement, or for it to be your purpose, if I can ask?
Yeah. So, all of these things do need to be there. And the thing is, if we think about our gifts, so think about what you're good at, and not just what you're good at, but what you're good at and you enjoy doing. Those are the gifts and the strengths that you want to grow.
Hello, Kristen, are you there? Looks like we've lost you. Hi, Kristen, can you hear me?
On again? I can. Yes. I'm sorry. Because of all the snow we're having, it's beginning to melt, and these big chunks of ice are falling down. And I wonder whether they're beginning to take out the internet a little bit. I hear all of these big chunks of ice falling. So I don't know where I lost you, but I was yammering on about purpose, my favorite topic.
So my question was whether you have to know your gifts in combination and your know your values, and does it have to be for others before you can say this is so its purpose?
So I don't know that listen, I think it does need to be for others. I think
Mhm.
reasonable disagree. And there are certainly the idea that uh, at different times in your life, your purpose may be more self enhancing than self transcending. And that at other times in your life, your purpose may be more self transcending than self enhancing. And so, generally, I think that as long as we're not mixing up purpose and goals, which we often do, so as long as we're not mixing those two things up, then I think we're off on the right track. Uh, the thing about a goal is it's how you make it happen, whereas the purpose is the why it matters. And all too often we think about our goals and our to-do lists and the things we want to accomplish, and those are wonderful and really, really important, but those are stepping stones on the path to our larger purpose.
So how then can we tie this subject of purpose? I mean, this is we call this the Passionate Professional series, and it's for people that are working in different professions, and they are looking at how to bring their passions to make the best of their professions. So how then can we tie this purpose um, topic into daily lives as professionals? Uh,
So, one of the things that I've been doing is doing a daily purpose statement. And the reason why I have been doing this is because all too often, when we think about purpose, when we think about values, these are things that are these big ideas that almost don't have anything to do with the stuff that we do on a day to day basis. But if you combine your how to make it happen with your why, if you make purpose based commitments on a daily basis, then you can really see how you are living your purpose in your professional life, in your personal life. And so this purpose statement exercise that I've developed that I use on a daily basis now. I think about the values that I want to guide me on a daily basis, and the strengths that I want to use, and who I want to positively impact. I also think about the fears and the anxieties and the things that might trip me up, because each day we always have them. And anytime we want to make a change or do something big, those fears and anxieties really rear up. And then instead of a to do list, I make my purpose based commitments list. And I think of the things that I am actually going to do today. So, on my purpose based commitments for today, one of the things is having a wonderful conversation with you. And then another is going to my daughter's choral concert. And, I would do both of those things anyway. But when I put it down and and see how it intersects with the things that I'm good at and the things that I value, I have imbued meaning and purpose and really a deeper significance. So instead of just going through the motions of my day, I am realizing how I am living on purpose.
that's interesting. This purpose statement thing. Can you just give us an example, like a run through, rather than just fill in blanks for yourself, for example, like because I value. It's just so people can relate to it more, if you get what I
Yeah,
mean.
absolutely. So, for example, my one for today,
Yeah.
because I value um, family um, and translating research, or family, communication, and faith. I will use my gifts for translating research, for doing hair and makeup for my daughter, uh, and for participating in a community, cooking and creating, to positively impact people who are listening, my children, and my community. And I accept my fears and anxieties about how I'm going to juggle it all. Whether I'm going to whether I'm going to be able to pull it off or make a mistake or embarrass myself in any of these talks. But I consciously make purpose-based commitments to show up with my whole heart to for this event, to spend the afternoon with my daughter and her friends getting ready for this 1980s choral pops concert,
Mhm.
and to prepare for a big lecture that I'm giving tomorrow. And so all of these things are things, again, that I would be doing whether or not I put it on a purpose statement. But when I think about the things that I'm doing in my day today, I
Mhm.
realize that they are purposeful and that I am living in keeping with my values. And so that actually makes me feel good at the end of the day, that I didn't just do stuff because I had to, but that I have the opportunity to be living purposefully and using my gifts in keeping with my values, hopefully to make a positive impact.
Wow, I love that. Can I have a go as well?
Yeah, please. Oh, I would love it. What's your purpose statement for today?
All right. So, because I value relationships, faith, and well-being, I'll use my gifts for um, communication, and presentation, and um, insight to possibly impact the lives of the people who will be viewing this series, my youth group in church, and my family. As I accept anxieties about no one turning up for the show, or internet or the internet breaking off, um, I consciously make purpose-based commitments to exercise, attend my youth group, and to show up regardless. And that's my purpose statement for today.
Oh, that's so beautiful. And see, so now at the end of the day, when you say, gosh, I did those things, you are
Hmm.
going to feel that much more purposeful and in tune with the fact that you're really living your values.
Wow, it's really cool. Something that we all need to try. So, if you can see the screen, it's going to be available on the replay anyway. If you ever thought about doing a purpose statement, so it's basically about combining your values with your gifts to positively impact the lives of others. Um, as while you're accepting your anxieties and your fears and making some purpose-based commitments. I think somewhere in your book you did mention that it's not just about having the purpose statement; it's actually by living it out. And I think that's the purpose of the commitments, that you're actually living it out. You have to make your purpose or your values actionable, just like you said. So that is great. I've learned something, and I hope you're all learning something as well. So I'm just going to move on and ask you some more questions. Somewhere in your book, you talked about the difference between a job, a career, and a calling, because this is the Passionate Professional series. Can you shed some more light on that? Because sometimes I just, when it's Monday morning, you're like, oh no, not that job again. So how then do we? I mean, what's the difference, and what should we be aiming for? Is it just a job? Is it just a career, or should we be aiming for a calling?
So there's this wonderful parable of a traveler who came across three men working. And he asked the first man, what are you doing? And the first man said, well, I'm putting one brick on top of the other. And that was true. He asked the second man, and the second man said that he was building a wall. And that was also true. And then he asked the third man, and the third man said, I'm building a cathedral. Now, that first man, well, he had a job. And the second man, he had a career. But the third man, he had a calling and saw the larger why behind what he was doing. Or at least that's the way the parable always goes. And,
Hmm.
this is certainly true that we all want to be the third man who is seeing the cathedral. But the second man who is building the wall, they're all putting one brick on top of the other. And I think this is a really important point when we think about purpose, because it's very easy to talk about purpose as the cathedral and the bigger why and the bigger idea. And that's true, but it also is putting one brick on top of the other, because we have to live our purpose on a day-to-day basis. And sometimes that's not particularly glamorous. So if we go to a job that we don't like, we have to ask ourselves, why are we doing that job? And there are very purposeful reasons potentially for doing that job. Maybe it's to put food on the table for your family. Maybe it is because you are working toward another job that is going to bring you more advancement or do something that you want to do in the future. Maybe it's because you know that while the job isn't always interesting to you, it is very important, because without you doing this work and without you doing this work well, people would not have something that they needed, or would suffer in some way. So the first thing is to always think about why your job matters. And almost all jobs very much matter. It's not that there are some jobs that matter and everybody else is just working for work's sake. No, any job that you do, people are relying on you. And so understanding that is a very important part of your purpose. But then the second thing to know is that if you have that larger why behind what you are doing, hopefully you can engage in some job crafting where you can create a job that you enjoy more, where you're using your gifts, where you feel like it is in keeping with your values and you're making a positive impact on folks. So one of the things that I encourage my students to do as they're applying for jobs is to look at the vision and mission statement of the company, and then to think about their own sense of personal purpose. and see whether those two overlap and how they overlap. And so when they write to apply to the company, they can say, because your company values, and then insert the values of the company. You can say, this actually works very well with my core values of, and talk about your values, and then talk about how your strengths go with the needs of the company. Anytime you can craft a job so that you are able to live out your purpose at the job, in addition to the purposeful work of doing the job to serve others or to support your family, then it's a win-win all around.
Wow, I like that. I like that way of thinking. That you might feel like you're in a job that is not your ideal job, but why does it matter to you? Um, First, this seeing the value that you're adding to others through the job, and also why you're doing the job at the moment, even though it might not be your dream job, you're doing it maybe because you're saving up for school and things like that. That can help you feel like it's purposeful as well. So basically, even the man that was just laying the bricks was actually living out a purpose, but he probably didn't know that as well. But that's really interesting. A really
Yeah.
different way to think about it.
So that's it. And that's why I like my purpose statement exercise, because what I tell people is that it's not that you don't have purpose right now and I'm going to miraculously give you a sense of life purpose. No, really, what I want to do is help people be able to more clearly see the purpose of their lives, because we we are all called to do purposeful things, and most of us are doing something that is quite purposeful, and being
Mhm.
able to bring that out and give ourselves some credit for it so we do more of it is really important.
So at this point, I'm going to ask then, what are some of the benefits of living a life of purpose? Or if you put it the other way, what are the dangers if you feel like you don't have a purpose or you're living without a purpose? Whichever one will do.
Right. So there is lots of great research on the health and well-being benefits of purpose. So people with a sense of purpose tend to live longer. They tend to live healthier lives. They tend to take better care of themselves in terms of preventative health measures. And you also see people who have a sense of purpose making more money at their jobs, having better relationships. All of these things, as I talk about them, it sounds like I'm doing an infomercial for a nutraceutical or something. In just 3 installments of 15.99, you can buy this pill. But unfortunately, it doesn't work that way, right?
Hmm.
These are not these are not something that you can buy in a pill. That's the bad news. The good news, though, is that purpose is not something either that you have or you don't. It's something that we can choose to do on a daily basis, and so one of the things that you can do is you can take some of these purpose, and I have some in my books, but you can also go online. Carol Riff and Michael Steger, they're both researchers who have designed these purpose and meaning scales that are about 7 or 8 questions. And you can kind of measure your sense of purpose. And it turns out that the higher you score on these sense of purpose and meaning in life, the better you do on all of these other measures. So these are things that you actually can measure, and then take steps to live on a daily basis and increase your sense of purpose.
I like the fact that you said that it's not a pharmaceutical product or something that you're selling, because I think sometimes if you say that if you have purpose, you live longer and things like that, people just feel, oh, that's what I've been looking for. Once I get purpose, then my life is sorted. But I think that you have a different opinion to that. Does purpose mean that you would always be happy in life? And if not, can you share why? Or can you give us personal experience or personal story about that?
Yeah. So wouldn't that be great? All you need to do is find your purpose and you'll be happy forever. Unfortunately, it does not work that way. So purpose, it is the thing that actually can help you get through the tough times, though. And one of the things I always tell my students is that when they look at a list of universal values, happiness is not on it. Happiness is not a value. Happiness is a byproduct of living your values. And the same thing is true with purpose. Having a sense of why doesn't mean that the road is going to be easy. In fact, people who have a sense of purpose often try to do very difficult things. And but as that line from Viktor Frankl, a man with a why can bear any how. And what he meant by that was that if you know why you are alive, then you can find it in yourself to deal with the difficult times. And I myself have had all sorts of challenging things in my life. And in fact, I'd like to tell you that because I had a sense of purpose, oh, I just rode through it and it was fine. But that's actually not true. I mean, when terrible things happen in your life, you can feel like you're lost, and you can say, is my purpose actually my purpose? You can question your faith, you can question everything, and that's absolutely normal. But having that sense of a sense of purpose can help you and guide you through some of those darkest times. The idea is that there's a wonderful children's book about going on a bear hunt, and you're going to catch a big bear, and you can't go, and there's mud, and you can't go over it, you can't go under it, you've got to go through it. And every time these children come across another obstacle, it's the same line: you can't go over it, you can't go under it, you've got to go through it. And that is my approach to the difficult challenges of life as well. But when you know who you are, when you have those sense of calling and of purpose, then it helps you slog through that mud and go through it. It's not easy, and people will have that feeling of being lost when times are really tough. It does, but I do truly believe that if you have a why at the end of the day, you can bear anyhow and move forward.
Yeah, I agree with you because it's a good thing you mentioned Viktor Frankl, and in that story, Man Search for Meaning and things, how they were in concentration camps and people were just the people that actually survived were the people that had something that they were longing for, something whether it was to be reunited with their families and things. They're the ones that actually survived. A lot of people just gave up hope, and then they died in the camps. But just like you said, if you have that purpose, it's more like your wife that would help you get through the difficult times, because there would always be difficult times. And there was something interesting that you also said, that it gets you when you go through the difficult times, it makes you start questioning, that is that really my purpose or not? And that brings me to my next question, which is purpose a once in a lifetime thing, or is it something that changes? Because if you face the difficult times and you're questioning yourself, then will your purpose change a bit due to that and things like that?
Absolutely. So, just one thing to say about the Viktor Frankl and the concentration camps around this is that we have to be very careful, because while having a sense of purpose can help you get through tough times, we never want to say that people who died did not have a sense of purpose, or
Hmm.
somehow gave up themselves and that they are to blame. And so this is where I think academic research and self-help, it has a little bit of a tension, because
Yeah.
while purpose is definitely a positive for people, it is not a cure-all, right? It is not going to help you survive if someone has a gun to your head, right? I mean, there are there and and so I think it's important to sort of see some of the limitations of this as well.
Mm.
And one of the other limitations of it is when you have a very tough time in your life, uh, you may rethink everything. I mean, I remember sitting on the edge of my bed, crying and saying, I have no idea what I'm doing. I think I'm just entirely a fraud. What is the purpose of my life? What am I going to do? And then I decided, and then I thought to myself, well, this is not a good look. I've written a book on this. And so I grabbed the book off of my shelf. And so here I am in tears in my bed, reading my own book to try to help myself find my purpose again. And what I realized was that I needed to add that second sentence to the purpose statement about fears and anxieties, and about making purpose-based commitments. And what I also realized was that sometimes as you're going through the mud, you've just got to put one foot in front of the other. And it's purposeful to stay alive. It's purposeful to keep going. Sometimes we don't have to be so lofty about things. Just getting through the day and doing the minimum that you can do when you're grieving, when you're hurt, those things, that is very purposeful. Survival, you have to survive before you can thrive. And so surviving in those tough times is purposeful in and of itself.
I agree with you. I think I remember there was a time that I posted on LinkedIn. I'm like, oh, I know there's some challenging times coming, and all I'm aiming to do is just to survive. My son was like, no, you should aim to thrive. I'm like, you can't get it. I'm just planning to survive during these difficult times because I know what's coming. Yeah, so sometimes we think that when we're just surviving, we're not living in purpose. But just like you said, sometimes when you're in the mud, it's just putting one foot in front of the other, really. And you also mentioned something about fears and anxieties that I would like you to touch on now, because uh, sometimes people tell you you should just overcome your fears, or you should um, ignore your fears, or push them aside. What's your thoughts on that? How should we approach our fears and our anxieties?
So I spent years trying to outrun my fears and anxieties. And I can tell you, first of all, it's a lot of work. And you have to run very fast. And second of all, they catch up with you anyway. So the idea of outrunning our fears and anxieties, or of saying, or of denying them and shoving them under the rug and trying to ignore them, well, the problem is that they seep out sideways. We can't do that. Uh, so rather than trying to ignore our fears and anxieties, actually looking at our fears and anxieties not only makes them less scary, but actually helps us learn and grow, because those fears and anxieties that we have, whether it is fear of failure, whether it is fear of death, whether it is fear of embarrassment, all of those fears and anxieties come from somewhere. And if we think of them as loyal soldiers who are trying to protect us, rather than scary monsters trying to attack us, then what we can do is learn from them and actually sort of see them as teachers, not as something to avoid, but something to sort of check in with. So, for example, if I have a fear that if I'm not perfect, I won't be loved, that's a very common one. And that was one that I tried to outrun for a long, long time, just by trying to be perfect at all times so that I would feel safe, right? For a lot of
Mhm.
successful people, that's a super common one. Where did that come from? Well, it was because as a child, I wanted to be, I wanted to be successful, and people complimented me when I was. Well, is that bad? Is it bad to be successful? No, it's not. But maybe my fear means that I need to relax a little bit, and try to let go a little bit of that perfection, because that's not going to help me take the risks I need in the next step of my career. And that maybe challenging myself to fail, to try something that I'm not going to be good at. Maybe these are some of the next steps that I need in my own growth. But I can't get to that unless I look at it and say, yep, I worry that if I'm not perfect, I'm not going to be loved. And to actually stare that down, not in an aggressive way, but I see this part of myself, and it is a loyal soldier trying to protect me. How can I learn from it so that I can grow and take that next step?
Wow. So basically, we need to check in with our fears instead of running from our fears, and learn from our fears, actually. Oh, I
Yeah,
like
that's
that.
really
Really
hard.
good.
It's really hard to
I
do,
know.
by the way. So this may be
I
something
know.
that people want to talk to a therapist about, or to talk to friends about. Anytime you're facing your fears, you don't want to do that alone.
I know. Yeah, you need some help with that. Um, we'll have about 5 minutes to go, so I'm just going to ask you some quick questions. This shouldn't be a quick question, but as much as you can, just briefly, how do you balance life? Because you do a lot of. I know you mentioned something about going part time at the time. How do you balance life and work as a professional? Because I know you've got 3 kids under the age of 10. So how do you balance all of that and living on purpose and and
I,
being a mom?
so one of my dear colleagues once told me that we should think about work-life balance as walking. And you know, when you walk, you are constantly out of balance, that it is
Mhm.
actually the act of controlled falling at all times. As you move your weight from one foot to another, you're always constantly out of balance and then but moving forward. And so with my family life, oh yeah, that's my crew. With my family life, you know, some days I'm all about the family and kids. Some days I'm all about work. I try to have an overall somewhat of a balance, but I have a 7, 9, 11, and twin 14-year-olds in our house right now. We This is not the time where I'm going to be able to work 60-hour weeks outside the home, and it's actually not a time that I want to. So I am trying to see balance as balance for my whole life. My kids are only young once, so I do spend a lot of time getting kids ready for choral concerts and taking kids to piano lessons and practicing lines with my daughter, who is the lead in her lower school play. So all of those things are really quite purposeful to me. They don't pay the big bucks, but maybe that'll come later.
Wow, thank you. It's really insightful that when we talk about finding balance, it means losing balance and regaining balance. It's not just you find balance once and for all. It's like a cycle. Just like if you think about the pedals of a bicycle, they are always at different points in time. They don't always stay aligned, if you get what I mean. That's insight, something to think about. Last question I'm going to ask you is because it's Passionate Professional series, and I know you've written a book that when you pick up the cover, you'd be like, WTF? Well, what advice would you give young professionals, people that are just starting out their careers and they're like, I don't know what to do with my life? What advice would you give them?
So the reason why I wrote Generation WTF, the idea was that it was a guide from getting from what the beep to a wise, tenacious, and fearless you. And I remixed the best of classic self-help guides from the last 100 years for a young adult audience. And so I actually would really recommend that people can read that book, or you can read some of the classic self-help books like Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People, and The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, because you don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's some wonderful, wonderful advice out there on working hard, thinking about others before yourself, and then finding your purpose as well.
Um, I think this has got 2 more minutes. What's your favorite book? I know you've written five, but what's your favorite book?
I so for two different audiences, for young adults, so for people age 18 to 30, The Big Picture, I really is one of my I really think it's my best book, because it is because it's a workbook and it's applied. For adults though, my Finding Your Purpose Audible original lecture series was an Associated Press bestseller, and it has gotten thousands and thousands of really positive reviews. So I think that one is one that is seeming to positively impact a lot of people. Uh, and when it comes to my books on changing dating and marriage patterns, those were fun. My hope is that nobody is saying that smart, successful women are not going to get married. That was a book that was came out in 2006. So that
Mhm.
was a real piece of the times. But now my hope is that we've gotten past those.
Wow, thank you so much, Kristen. It's been a 1 hour packed with a lot of insights and learning. Just at the bottom of the screen, you can see a scrolling message. If you want to find out more about Christine Whelan and her work, please visit our website, www.christinewhelan.com. She's written 5 books. If you're on Audible, you should definitely get the lecture series on finding your purpose. It's been a great time. Thank you for adding so much value to us, and thank you for the audience. Although they've been relatively quiet today, but I know there's some people watching, and some people also catch up on the replay as well. So, as we always say at the end of the show, till we meet again, dear friends, make sure you keep living with passion and purpose. It's been nice hanging out with you today. Bye, everyone. Thanks, Christine.
Thank you. Bye.